the Carolina Panthers, entering year 2 with their quarterback Bryce Young. We don't like him too much. We're not too high on him. Hayden he thinks they could pull out 7 wins this year, but the ECG verdict is dead last in the division at 4-13. I, however, only have him getting a total of 2 wins along with Dante and Don. So I'm going to spearhead this real quick. Look, first of all, I will say I'm a big believer in Bryce Young. I think he's a great player. I think he's talented. He has it. He has what it takes. The problem is, right, what's around him. Now, the offensive side, it's not terrible at this point. They draft JT Sanders to go with Tommy Tremble and Ian Thomas at tight end. They draft Jonathan Brooks, right, who, I know he's coming off an injury, but he looks, he was regarded by many people as one of the top running backs in this draft class to go with 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗶𝘲 Hubbard and Miles Sanders in that backfield. It's solid, but not great. At wide receiver, you add Deontay Johnson and draft Xavier Legette out of South Carolina to go with Terrace Marshall and Jonathan Mingo. So you have some guys at wide receiver, right? The offensive line, they spent big money bringing in Damian Lewis, Austin Corbett, and Robert Hunt on the interior while keeping their tackles in 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀 and Taylor Moton. This offensive line, in my opinion, could be really solid. The problem here is everything they lost on defense. They lost so much. Brian Burns, right? Star edge rusher who's now with the Giants. But he, in my opinion, he's not even the most important loss. The most important loss is linebacker Frankie Louvu. He was so productive for them this past year. It is a massive loss. He had the most tackles and second on the team in sacks. And then you lose Von Bell, who also had, I believe, over 60 tackles. Linebacker Kamu Grugier-Hill, who's, from Hawaii. But you lose him. He was very productive. CJ Henderson out at corner. You lose him. Yatura Gross-Matos and Jeremy Chin. You lose both of them. It's a lot of production that's lost on defense. And while you still have Derek Brown, you signed Jadeveon Clowney, you still have Shaq Thompson, you bring in Josie Jewell, you still have J.C. Horn and Dante Jackson on the back end. They did not replace their key departures on defense with notable talent, right? I'm not saying I don't like the players they brought in, but they are not, in my opinion, going to be productive enough to make up for what was lost. Now, Derek Brown, a beast on the interior of that defensive line. He had over 100 tackles as a defensive tackle. You don't see that very often. But this defense just loses so much. I don't know how, the offense might be okay this year, but their defense is going to be abysmal this year. And another thing, the statistics around this team are super weird. They were dead last on offense in yards and second last for points. But, they ran the 10th most plays, right? They were not efficient. And then on defense, they allowed this 3rd most points, yet they allowed the 4th least amount of yards. So they allowed a ton of points, but barely any yards. And they had the best passing defense in the league in terms of yardage. You hardly ever see that from the worst team in the league, that they had the best passing defense. And I'll tell you why. It's because opposing teams didn't have to throw the ball against them. They could just run the ball and count on turnovers and poor offensive play to get the ball in great field positioning, which is why they scored so much. This team is losing too much on defense. As much as I believe in Bryce Young and a revamped offensive line, I like some of their weapons. This defense just loses so much that regression is bound to happen. It's bound to happen. So I really don't feel comfortable giving them more than maybe 4 or 5 wins is very generous in my opinion. I see them only winning 2 this season.
So it's understandable. Even looking at this, I was hard pressed not to join you on the 2. My wins for Carolina is pretty much just going to a good chunk of them are coin flips of New Orleans and Arizona, and then I think Atlanta will probably rest their starters at the end, so I think they'll beat them. So that's 3 wins. Who knows what Arizona is going to look like? Who knows what the Raiders are going to look like by week 3? So that's kind of where I've got some of the wins there. That defense is just gutted though, and I know you mentioned J.C. Horn, but can the dude stay healthy enough to actually, perform anything, but like do anything, have a healthy season. You got Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, that's a good pass rush, but it's no Brian Burns. This isn't prime Jadeveon Clowney with the Texans. Derek Brown is going to have scoliosis by the end of the year, the way he's going to have to carry that defense. I mean, that's how it's going to be. I mean, offense, you look at it, Bryce Young, I don't think that if they get 2 wins or 5 wins, I don't know, Hayden has them at 7 wins. I ain't going that far, but if they can get to that 2 to 5 win, you can't really put the blame on him, because I guarantee you every win that Carolina gets, it's because Bryce Young had to carry that entire team on their back. Chuba Hubbard, I mean, as mentioned in the trivia, not that bad of a running back. Pretty good, solid running back. Then, backing him up is Jonathan Brooks, Miles Sanders. You got Adam Thielen as your reliable veteran. Deontay Johnson, you don't know what he's going to look like there. I mean, you saw what he was like at Pittsburgh. There were times where he was great, and then there were other times where he just stared at his teammate fumbling the football and just kind of looked at there and went, "That's a damn shame." And I mean, that was Deontay Johnson right there. Just stared at the ball, watched the recovery happen, didn't do anything. Jonathan Mingo, Xavier Legette, Terrace Marshall Jr. These are still young guys that you gotta hope can build a rapport with Bryce Young. It's a new coach. They spent some money on the offensive line, but they didn't address it barely during the draft. So it's going to be interesting. I think if they will their way to 5 wins, it is just because of Derek Brown carrying the defense and Bryce Young having to carry the entire team. I want to see this dude succeed. Dude is just unfortunately in a terrible, terrible positioning on the team that he's on. I'm sorry, your owners have failed you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dave Canales could definitely help out with Bryce Young this year, like developing his game and making him like a better quarterback in the long run, because he helped out a lot with Baker Mayfield last year in Tampa Bay. But having guys like Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks I feel like they're gonna rely heavy on the run game, even though they do have guys like Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen, OG Adam Thielen. But I can see them at most getting 5 wins. This is still a very young team, we genuinely don't know what's going to happen with this. You got a guy like Robert Woods too on the offensive line, but is it enough kind of help that they have? Their defense is like also a huge question mark. I mean, you got Jordan Fuller, you got Dane Jackson. Those guys could help, but they did, like Khalil said, they lost way too much on the defensive side of the ball.
Frankie Louvu, Jeremy Chin, those were not.
Oh my God, those are not guys.
Those were major losses.
Yeah. So, in the long run,
and of course Brian Burns.
Oh God, Brian Burns is man. I could see them like
sad Spider-Man noises in Carolina.
Yeah, very much. Like Carolina's going to be another year, another down year. Eventually they'll be back, but it ain't this year, guys.
Yeah, but even after the year you had at 5 wins, that's improvement with a brand new head coach and so much young talent. I can't.
Panthers fans gotta be in this rebuild for the long haul, because I think it's going to take a couple seasons to reaccumulate defensive talent. I think they did a good job at giving Bryce Young more to work with, but that defensive side of the ball is so thin that it's going to be a tough season for them, in my opinion.
And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell notification so you're always notified.
All right. Well, the 12. Oh my God. That's what I'm saying. This one, like, bro, you just gotta just be you, bro. Just be you, bro.